I'd like to call to order the February 10th meeting of the Portsmouth School Board. Can we have the roll call, please?
Absolutely.
She can find it.
Jennifer Shump. Here. Pip Clues. Here. Stephen Adler.
Here.
Byron Maddow.
Here.
Brian French.
Here.
Lisa Rappaport.
Here.
Nancy Clayberg.
Here.
Fish Campbell. Lee Hudson.
Here.
Eric Moore.
Present.
Nathan Delaney.
Here.
Thank you. Can we please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the
Flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Do we have any announcements or recognitions? Nancy?
I have an announcement. Every year for the past 17 years, my son Michael, who is 36 and has Down syndrome, has participated in the Penguin Plunge, where you jump in the ocean at Hampton Beach, and it all benefits Special Olympics. Well, this year it was canceled because it was so cold. But a group of students from Portsmouth High School, it looks like they went to Wallace Sands Beach. I saw it on Facebook. They jumped in the ocean because they had gone out, they had raised money for Special Olympics, and then it was canceled, but they thought, well, we're gonna go jump in the ocean. So I think there were about 15 of them, led by Cause, and Brian Rogers, who's the special ed teacher at Portsmouth High School. So I just wanted to give a shout out to those guys because that was really neat of them to fulfill the commitment and jump in the ocean, even though it was 10 degrees below zero, whatever it was. So I thought that was cool.
I'm cold just thinking about that. Anyone else?
So I got a couple quick ones. One is just I wanted to thank the fire department. So we went through a couple of leaky situations at the middle school over the course of the last week with all the cold. That ended up having an impact on some of our one of our sprinkler heads, and in one situation we ended up spending time evacuating the Little Harbor and then coming back, and then the second time FD was on the scene very quickly and worked with us to try to develop a solution so that we were able to stay in the building, monitor it in the appropriate ways. It was just another good example of the partnership we have with all the other departments in the city, and the fact that they were, all about trying to be solution-based in the way in which they're approaching the situation. So I really appreciate that. Thanks to DPW, recently, made sure that they prioritized the removal of snow on Parrott Ave. It was getting a little tight out in front of the middle school with buses and traffic and people trying to park and snowbanks and all that type of good stuff. And DPW made an effort to prioritize making sure that got taken care of. So thank you to them. And thanks to the police department. The police department made an effort as they knew that students were going to be doing a walkout. And I'll reiterate all the things that I've said in the press and things I've said to parents and all those. Not a school-sponsored event, not something that we coordinated. Student-run thing. Students faced disciplinary consequences as was appropriate in certain situations. And but the PD was aware of the fact that students were going to be making this transition to downtown. We were like, we're not in a position to, this is not our event, we can't supervise it. And not the PD did per se, but they had an officer that was around as kids were transitioning just to make sure that they were safe as they went through that. So lots of different departments in the city really helping us out, and we really appreciate those ongoing activities from all those departments. And then last, I got, just before we went into non-public session, Tom Kozakowski, our athletic director, gave me a heads up from the slopes of Gunstock that the boys Alpine team just won the Division I state championship. So congratulations to them, and thanks to Cause for the instantaneous updates on state championships.
All right, and I have one more announcement to add to the mix. For those of you who are last-minute planners for Valentine's Day, The high school show is this weekend, Friday and Saturday night. It is a fabulous love story, almost Maine. And you can go Friday 7 p.m., Saturday 2 p.m. or 7 p.m. There's, I think, a snow plan if one of them gets snowed out to have a show on Sunday. But great way to support the hard work of the kids at the high school and have a good date night if you don't have reservations yet. So I'll put in that plug for high school theater. Anything else? All righty. Moving on to the consent agenda. Would anyone like to make a motion to approve the 3 sets of minutes from January 27th, non-public, January 27th, public, and February 3rd work session?
I'll move to approve the minutes from January 27 non-public, 27 public, February 3rd workshop session.
Thanks, Byron. Do we have a second? Okay. Any discussion? Pip? Typo?
Yeah, I just noticed that on the January 27th regular minutes, it appears that our teacher rep and student rep were not listed as present, but I believe they were present. You guys can correct me if I'm wrong.
Thank you, Pip.
They just need to be added.
Okay. Any other discussion? Have a roll call vote on that, please?
Pip Clues,
Yes.
Stephen Adler,
Yes.
Byron Matto,
Yes.
Jennifer Shump,
Yes.
Brian French,
Yes.
Lisa Rappaport,
Yes.
Nancy Claiberg,
Yes.
Tish Campbell, Lee Hudson,
Abstain.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have public comment. I don't see anyone present has signed up for public comment for the regular meeting. We do have several folks signed up for our public hearing coming up. Is there anyone who would like to speak for public comment for the regular meeting present? Okay, if you would like to speak for public comment, we need your name and address, and you have 3 minutes.
My name is Robert Bogartis, Park Street, Portsmouth. My question is with the walkout. Were there any student consequences to the walkout?
I'm sorry, sir, during public comment, you're welcome to speak, but we don't typically respond
Answer.
in the
You don't-
moment.
You don't answer?
No.
Okay, so there's no comment. Is that correct?
You are welcome to provide your thoughts to us, but no, we do not traditionally respond to the comments in the moment.
Well, as a taxpayer, I'm just concerned that the dollars and cents that I pay for the heat, light, electricity, and staffing of the schools, as I sat in my home at 2 o'clock on that Tuesday and watched all the kids walk downtown, and it's already been mentioned about the liability issue. Had there been, and I'm proud of the fact somebody stepped up and notified the police department so that there were no, should there have been a tragedy, let me tell you, if I had a student that was hit by a car, there'd be a big problem. So somebody was smart enough to alert the police for that. But I really struggle, I'm a veteran. No flags at the city hall, that's a whole nother topic. But it bothers me that there are no consequences, is what I guess I'm hearing. And I have talked to people that have students that chose to go home, took the day off during school hours, and actually talking to that parent or this particular family, they said they knew that their son and daughter's actions, there would be consequences from the family home. In other words, as an adult, have kids, raising them with responsibility, they chose to not join the crowd. The peer pressure must have been unbelievable. My opinion. I have a lot of history with a lot of this kind of stuff, but I just wanted to make the comment, and I've been told, and I want to repeat, there were no consequences to the students that left the building.
So we don't respond to public comment, but I don't want I think your perception is if I don't say that that's not true, that we're hiding something. We're not. So we did go through normal disciplinary consequences with kids. So we have approximately, as of this morning, the number I was given was that we had 180 students
Yeah, I had that.
who left, who were not present during a scheduled fourth block class. We did this normal process that we would go through with parents, which is to say, okay, here's the story, what's going on.
Right.
And is this something that this is typical of other situations. Is this something that you are condoning or allowing or approving? And my understanding as of this morning is that 178 families agreed, and 2 students were in a situation where the families were like, we did not endorse this. So those students are facing disciplinary consequences as a result, and then we processed, with families, the rest of those other situations. So we followed the same procedures that we would follow normally, and I think what's important, and I've sent many emails to folks over the last week. A couple things are important, I think, for the community here, which is that would be the same situation if we had a group of students with a different political philosophical perspective who wanted to go downtown and protest. We would handle it the same way. That'd be true if it was on a different issue. That would be the case. But what we take disciplinary action against, which is, is not the act of, because I had some parents who were very upset saying, "You're going to punish my kid for political speech?" No, I'm not, but I will. But your kid does need to live up to the expectations of attendance in the same way as we normally would. So that's the way we processed it, and we process it the same way in the future.
I'm not denying that the kids have a right to do what they wanted to. But
you know,
during school hours, and if I were an administrator, I would have brought in the 2 people to talk about the positive and the negative of their issue from an educational point of view.
Sure.
So thanks for listening to my 10 cents.
Thank you. Do we have anyone on Zoom for public comment?
There's nobody on Zoom.
Okay, then we will close public comment for now. Now I would like to reopen the public hearing on our budget, and we do have several people signed in to speak to that. And sir, did you want to return to speak to the budget, or did you sign up on our budget sheet? Okay, so then next we have Petra Huda, if you'd like to come up, and do please kindly state your name and address for the record, and then you may speak to the budget.
Petra Huda, Portsmouth. So the first thing I want to ask is, because I didn't see anything listed, do you have an updated presentation listed with the actuals as requested by myself and 2 of your board members at the first meeting, public hearing?
We do not.
Okay. So, next thing I'd like to ask, and I'm going to go in order here, from the first meeting where I asked for the actuals, and I said basically your presentation was useless. In that presentation, you don't even have a column for increases or decreases. So I would ask this board, how do you know which area is going up or down? Or are you doing this work on your own? First question. Second question, in the second presentation that was put out, I don't know if there's a page number here, it's what the title was continuing budget. What if we just rolled everything? So what does this mean? I tried to put this together and I didn't have any idea. Does this mean you're adding 3%? What does this mean to you as a school board? What are you interpreting this as? Is this your final budget? Next thing. So since there was no increases or decreases listed in the information that was given to you, I did my own. So what I did was I actually took the list that was given to you and I went back and looked at 26 and 27 as it compared to the budgets in 25. So my expectations on this would be that you would want to know which areas were increasing or decreasing, and you can look at your detail to tell that. But since there were no questions going forward and you didn't have the information, I'm gonna basically ask the questions that I would have expected you to ask. So, I'm not going to bother with salaries. I know that you're moving people around, and I can't really tell because I don't know where the FY25 actuals landed that would give you the opportunity to say, oh, I need to move this one from here to here. So I'm going to let that go. The thing that caught my eye was on the other operating expenses. Now, if you put together I put together all of the operating from 25, 26, and 27, and then I did a variance on it. And then I did a percent of variance. So that's where I'm coming from. So the change from 26 to 27, the stuff that jumped out at me was in the schools, Dondero went up 48%. Little Harbor went up 25%. Middle school went up 71%. And high school went up 28%. Now, this is not salaries, this is not benefits, this is other operating expense, which definitely is under the school board's control. And in a minute, I will give you some of the examples of where this is and see if you could answer the question, because I couldn't. The next thing that was surprising, phys ed, 26 to 27 budget went up 155%. Tech careers went up 10%. Something else, SPED elementary went down 24%. English second language went down 29%. Adoptive services went up 79%. And then we have stuff that shouldn't be affected by anything in collective bargaining. That also went up. Your property insurance and pupil transport and out of district. Out of district only went up 70%. So the questions that I would expect you guys to ask on this stuff, and I'll give you the page if you want to follow along. On page 6, Dondero, FY26, I'm looking at supplies. They're up $10,350. That's 59%. Books are up $3,800, 32%. Replacement furniture, fixture, and equipment is up $12,000. That's 400%. Library, next, page 7. Library books are up $1,000, 17%. Total operating expense for Dondero is up 48%, as I said. Next, we are looking at supplies for Little Harbor, up $4,468, or 21%. New F&E, $2,000. This is for conference room chairs that was declined the previous year. That's a very interesting question to me. Why did you decline it and then move it forward? Computer instruction software was up $7,000, or 700%. Why? Guidance supplies up 50%. Page 13, the total operating up $19,448, or 25%. I want to point out this because I didn't understand it, but I think it's wonderful. New Franklin was up 1%. They're doing something right, or they know what they're doing. Middle school. And this one was interesting. This is contract services. There's a new line item in there, new outdoor classroom, $18,000. Does the board approve of that? Instruction supplies up $9,597, or 17%. Page 22, PMS books up $25,851, or 238%. Page 23, new F&E, same thing as before. You cut totally in 25, and now there's $20,000 there in 26. The total operating costs for the middle school are up by $78,873, or 71%. High school, page 29. PHS contract services, which is a new line, $11,850. What is that? Supplies are up $10,475, or 315%. Page 33, science, F&E, same thing, up $2,890. Page 34, this one kind of baffles me. Page 34 for the high school, dues and fees are up $675, or 169%. Admin dues and fees are up 4,700. Graduation expense up $4,250 or 32%. Student activity support up $11,750 or 90%. The total operating for the high school is up $67,879 or 28%. Page 45, phys ed. They have PMS supplies in there are up 47%. Page 46, repairs and maintenance are up $17,000 or 425%. Health instruction continued. That's up $8,800. The total on this one is the one that was really big and was up 155%. So I'm asking you, because I don't know if you have the answers, this is what I would be doing, and this is what I'm going to be doing moving forward, is asking the questions of why. Because a lot of these questions will probably be answered if you did have the actuals, but you don't. So as a resident, I'd really like to know. I hope I didn't go too fast, and if you need the same things, let me know. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Esther Kennedy. Again, please state your name and address, and then you may speak to the budget.
Esther Kennedy, 41 Pickering Ave, Portsmouth. When I was reviewing everything that has been presented, I'm really kind of confused. Because in some of your paperwork, you're saying that the budget's up 6.13% at $71,290,000, and then in some it's around $70 million, and you're at 4+%. So it's real not clear, and depending on where you look and how you're doing your figures, it's off. So I guess I would like some clarification on that. I agree with Petra, we need actuals. I'm kind of sad the actuals aren't here. Every budget I look at has actuals. As a mentor, I think I'm on my 17th person in the areas of administration in the state of New Hampshire. And one of the things I do is I support them in understanding their budgets and trying to figure out budgets. And every one of them has had actuals. So I'm not sure why Portsmouth is special and doesn't need to have actuals, but I would highly encourage that you bring it forward. So I did go to your expense report for January 2026. Oh, first I want to thank you. Peter and I were at the fireman, and we were given no information ahead of the meeting to have public comment on, and I want to thank the school board for giving us information. But I went to the expense reports, and if I was sitting here looking at the budget, I would have to ask why in January we already are $225,397 in the arrears in Little Harbor. Why in January in a reading program are we $113,514 in the arrears? Why in January in special needs services are we $249,395 in the arrears? Those are things that you should start looking at when you're looking at your budgets, trying to figure out why are we having these discrepancies. There's some other discrepancies in this that I would be asking and looking at that. Given the fact that you don't have actuals to go on as a board member, I guess this is the only resort you have to look at. But I'm hoping you're looking at your January report because you have some access in some of your areas too. And I will let you take a look at those. But I'm hoping that you're taking this report saying we're in January, halfway through, and this is what our budget, we should be looking at for our budget. Again, I do not believe you need to add an assistant director at special ed for, I think it was $140,000. You don't need it. You need to start looking at what your director's doing. And I realize the coordinators, I appreciate the explanation of coordinators and how they're different here. They really aren't different. The state's about 50-50 in the way you guys do it and the way other people might have one coordinator for all buildings and pay them as an administrator. But you have a lot of personnel in your budget. You have sending districts. This budget of $71,290,695 is for 1,480 students because you're getting revenues for all the sending district students. You're getting people that are paying to come in that's offsetting the costs. So I really have to ask how you're looking at all that. We haven't given I haven't seen real good revenue sheets. I would encourage them to be more prominent. But in the end, you are still sending kids, throwing them away, and we're now up to $5,232,000. And that does include the transportation. And nowhere in here do I see programming. Nowhere in here do I see how you're going to fix that problem. One of the sheets you got, and I saw the explanation on it, and I was kind of interested in that, was how much we get back for special education aid from the state. And those are kids that are over $76,000 in cost, and you get some of that back, percentage depending on what the state has to give you. In many districts, they only look at kids, and you can't, any child that's on Medicaid cannot be on special ed aid, and vice versa. Many districts will only put their students that are out of district and try to get the special ed aid. In my case, in order to get special ed aid, you can use everything. So I don't have any out-of-district placed kids. I haven't placed an out-of-district child in 17 years. I've shared that numerous times with you all. The only ones I have are potentially court-based. But we do try to recoup money of kids that are in our district that cost a lot of money to support. Whether it's a specialized paraeducator, whether it's a nurse, we do try to recoup that cost. As I shared with you, I was pretty upset the last time that you were distinguishing things into the budget about kids and where they might be placed by the cost. I would encourage you, so I could figure out, because of the list you made, the numbers you put in for Cat Aid, and the bottom line is it's just out-of-district placements. So you're losing a lot of money that you could recoup. In Guilford, it's sad the state's doing it. Actually, I have a complaint with them because they use the one rule, which is not legal. You should be looking at 11, but they did put our one student up. And again, I don't have any out of district. But I'm recouping a high-cost student in my district. So there's some more revenues that we can bring in. There's some more revenues that we should be proactive in getting. And I would encourage that to happen. But it was pretty clear by the numbers you gave me and the numbers that are in your special ed aid that all you did was put in out of district, and you didn't recoup anything from high cost kids. That you might have a nurse with them, they might have a lot of services. Because anything above 75, 77, depending on the year, you can recoup from the state. So again, I worry about us throwing away our kids. I worry about the fact there's no programming in this of addition, nothing. And we can't keep going that way, folks. That's not right. We're here to educate all children. And I ask you to really look at a budget that can educate all children. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wants to speak as part of the public hearing in the audience? Seeing nobody, I will close the public hearing. And next up, we have the superintendent's report.
First, you have school board email summary. I will let you know that so there was 3 emails that came in relation to the walkout to you. I think I've responded to all of those. I also received a bunch, and I just wanted the board to know, and it's reflective of the conversation a little bit of the conversation we had during citizens' comments. My conversation with folks has been very similar throughout. That as a public institution, public body, we need to have political neutrality, and I think that's particularly true. And that as became clear that students were going to have the protest, we had conversations with staff in advance about making sure staff understood where the boundaries were for staff, and that it was not going to be a school event. We're going to have a normal school day. The expectation is people are at their posts doing their jobs, that type of thing. And I think part of the conversation we had with staff is that in a period of time with this much kind of tension in society, but it should be the same always, is that it's really important that people have faith in their public institutions, and that their public institutions are playing the role that we're supposed to play. And our core mission for us is education and preparing our youth for the next step, and being able to step into society. So we, in that role, what's really important is that we stay as neutral kind of arbiters in tense situations, and we don't. None of us take the opportunity to have the public body be a vehicle for our own kind of political philosophy or opinions about where things are going to go. Simultaneously, we also want to create an environment where our kids are, as they are, I think a bunch of our students were in a situation where they are becoming young adults, and as they become young adults, they're starting to flex a lot of different types of kind of muscles about who they are as humans. And a bunch of them, I think, were interested in starting to try out what does it mean to be a citizen, and ultimately made the decision that they were going to do what they were going to do. I think understood that school rules were going to be in place as they went out to do that. I, respect for students. We end up with some students who ended up with discipline out of that. Students who felt like, I believe in something to the point where I'm willing to accept the consequences, no matter what that belief is. I respect that students are going through that process. So I did have a lot of conversations with several conversations with parents in the community. More conversations, more of the emails I received were from people that actually didn't have kids in our system, but were concerned about what they thought might be happening in our schools. And I think I think all of the conversations I've had so far with people have been really productive. It's been a good opportunity to exchange ideas, listen to what people are concerned about, their potential fears, about what they believe might be happening, and then to just kind of talk through the specifics of what I know and understand and what we're trying to do. And ultimately, I think all of those conversations have generally ended with, okay, it's good to hear that that's the position of the schools overall, and I hope that you're going to continue, you will live up to those ideals that you're speaking about. And I think those have been those conversations. So again, one last time, I've said it to the paper, I've said it to people I've talked to, no staff involvement in the particular event. Student-driven, student-led. Students put out information in social media that confused people, because students had put out information that it was a staff and student walkout, which got a lot of people elevated around and I think I got some conversation where it was, you mean my tax dollar is going to pay for people to be out performing political action while I'm paying them to educate kids? And it's like, no, that's not what's happening. Again, good dialogue. I appreciate the conversation. We've had a couple this year that have been interesting now. So we had the walkout, we had the conversation. We have 2 different First Amendment issues in 1 year. We've had the walkout and people trying to figure out kind of the interaction of our students with the First Amendment there. And then we had the conversation that we had in the late fall going into the basketball season around student prayer at basketball games. And so I think we've had two, I think, good, strong, robust conversations as a community about these things. And I feel like in both situations, I feel like we've ultimately taken the professional approach, the thing that we're supposed to do. And I think that's where we'll continue to be. So anyways, and like I said, kudos to those students, not necessarily around the particular belief they had, but I just respect any students who respectfully protest and are willing to accept the consequences of that type of civic action, whether, whatever side of a political opinion they're on. So that was school board stuff. Email summary. Longer than normal. You also have in here something not for the purposes of, you don't need action. We always make sure that you are aware of retirements. Those retirements and resignations are become official as soon as I receive them, but we give you notification. So Linda Schmidt, who's the librarian at Dundero, has decided that this will be her last year with us, and she wrote a lovely letter about her experience at Dundero, and which I think is really reflective of her, who she's been as a professional, and she will be missed. Although she also has a lot of involvement with the schools. She's heavily involved in the Clipper Foundation and does a lot of work in that way that helps set up teachers to receive grants for innovative practices. So best of luck to Linda, and we'll work on finding Linda's replacement in the upcoming hiring cycle. And then, Brian, you want to talk expenditure and revenue?
Sure. It's the most exciting thing we'll talk about tonight. So you'll see on your expense report, which is where we always start. We are still, again, as we were last month, kind of shooting right down the middle. Again, the overages you'll see for the available balance is generally people that have to be moved. And again, we're in the process of doing that this month as we do our deep dive. But you still see at the bottom, we have a balance. And keep in mind, too, we do encumber most of our expenses. So I already have held on to those funds. And outside of that, we still have about $4 million left outside of that. So, you go to our revenue, the biggest thing you will see there is we got our first half of our tuition from SAU 50. So you'll see at the top, third line from the top, you'll see the $3.7 million that we received for that. And amongst other things, we've already gotten half our school building aid. We'll be getting our second half soon. It's about $741,000 we get a year for that. We got about one or two more years of that, and then it gets cut in half for about a year or two, and then it's done. And this is all from the middle school project. You'll see our sped aid is in. We're about 1.3 million right now. Medicaid's at about 319,000, and we're constantly getting checks for that. And that's pretty much it. Nothing too exciting, nothing out of the ordinary, no outliers or anything like that I'm concerned about at this point. But I will take any questions you may have.
I have a question.
Nancy?
So these areas there where we are over budget, you feel that evens out by the end of the fiscal year, correct?
Absolutely. Yeah, we operate on a zero bottom line budget. So as long as the bottom line is in the black, we're fine. But again, these will be, sometimes they just always go over. Like you see cost center 113, there's a $16 charge in there. There was no money budgeted, but that's going to be over. Special ed is generally over a little bit each year, but we usually have savings elsewhere that take care of that, as well as additional revenue. So.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, I will move on to old business. And the first thing up is consideration and approval of the proposed fiscal year 27 budget. And in a moment, I will entertain a motion on that, but I just want to tee up the process really quickly before we do that. We are in a position tonight to make a motion to consider the budget as proposed by the superintendent. Then we can have a discussion, and if anyone on the board during the discussion feels that there's something they would like to alter whether there's something you want to take out or something you want to put in, you can make a motion to amend the budget to make that change. If you get a second, we can discuss that and pass it or not. And then if it passes, it would be incorporated into the overall budget that we then vote on. So the goal would be to try to get to consensus and a unanimous or near unanimous approval of the budget. If there are substantial questions that people have that they feel cannot be answered in this meeting, we do have the option of tabling the vote and convening again next Tuesday to bring back that additional information and take the budget vote then. So with all of that preamble, I would like to entertain a motion to approve the proposed fiscal '27 budget.
And just for clarification, that's the 4.8.
Correct.
I'll make the motion that we approve the budget of $70,182,153, which it indicates a 4.4% increase. Did I read that correctly? 4.48% increase.
Second?
Thank you. Discussion.
I have some questions.
Nancy,
Oh,
go
did
ahead.
somebody else go first?
Go ahead,
I
Nancy.
I think Brian handed out the district requests, the sheet that we all got tonight. And I guess I just have questions about the requests that obviously didn't get approved and put in the budget. And can you just, maybe Zach can answer this, can you just give us a brief explanation of why those positions didn't make the cut?
So, in a lot of these situations, most of the time, it starts with how much, what do we think is a request that can be ultimately approved by the city council, right? And so we start our kind of thought process around what is the amount of money that we think we would have the ability to spend, and then work from there. And so thinking about feeling like where we're at and the fact that we're down approximately 4.5 full-time equivalents in our proposal, we felt like we were at a reasonable place where we were, and is something that I think would be hopefully palatable to the city manager and to ultimately the council. So working from that amount of money, we then made decisions about what we prioritized. And so the things that were left on the table that were requests from different principals and directors were engineering design teacher at the CTE, an additional half-time ESL teacher at Dundero, first grade teacher at Dundero, a case manager at Little Harbor, a case manager at Dundero, and then a media production instructor, which would have been connected with the CTE program. Ultimately, we thought through, when we were transparent with some of these positions, those were the initial requests that were sent to us. And while we were actually in conversation with the people who were the directors who were lead of those positions, they were okay with some of the solutions that we brought forward, and they actually took those off the table. But we're being transparent with you that what we were initially asked for. So with the ESL position, for example, we already restructured the day of one of the people in the district to provide additional assistance at Dundero, to move away from, I think it's a day difference now.
1 day difference.
1 day
Yep.
difference where the person would have been at New Franklin, and now they're going to spend that extra day at Dundero, and we think we can offset the need by doing that. The first grade teacher at Dundero, we think right now we're able to, again, that was something through conversation, that we think we're going to be able to manage what we have, assuming that we don't have, I think we get nervous about what the kindergarten enrollments have looked like especially the last year. So we've had last year, and then it skipped a year, but two out of the last 3 years, we've had significantly higher than anticipated kindergarten enrollments. But this part of this was built in, I think, a little bit to be a buffer, and so we want to be more conservative in the way in which we're approaching it. And so right now, the decision would be that we would hold off and not add that role. And if we had to redistribute teachers within the system to cover additional classroom need at Dondero. That would be our approach. I think the CTE positions are ones that we eventually want to move in the direction of. We see there being an ongoing kind of desire to maintain strong CTE programming. I think it's a lot of different people support CTE programming. We are also, though, in the midst of, we will be hiring a permanent director. We have an interim director right now. We'll be hiring a permanent director this spring, and we really want that, whoever that next permanent director is, to have a heavy hand in the decision-making process about where we would take additional steps. And then we have 2 case manager positions. I think, folks are the principals in those 2 cases were worried about the caseload of some of the folks in their building and the need, based on the intensity of need and the number of students that case manager is trying to deal with, that they'd like to spread out that load a little bit, but we just didn't feel in this particular cycle that that rose to the level at which we would add 2 additional positions. So all those are things I think are when principals come and they're saying these are the things I need in order to fulfill the mission. We respect that where that's coming from, the expertise connected to and the lived experience connected to those requests, but often it comes up against, there is only, we have what we have to spend, and even that we don't know will totally get approved, and then we just make the best decisions we can, both with these individuals, but also then back across the group. So we were having individual conversations with people who are at particular at cost centers, principals, directors, and then we came back to them internally saying, here's where we think we're at right now, what's additional feedback you have as a group about what we're proposing? And ultimately, while there are people who wish some of these things were going to happen, I think people understood where we were as a collective by the time we finished up with our proposal. So that's my best explanation I can give.
Was there consideration to consolidate those 2 case manager positions into one that could be split between the 2 schools?
I think it wasn't a large conversation, because I think we thought at the moment that it'd be nice to be able to lessen those loads, but at the same time, under the fiscal constraints that we're at, I don't know. We didn't have that consideration, and I think part of it too is I think it can be. I worry. We'll always look at those types of things. I worry about the effectiveness sometimes of a case manager split across multiple buildings, especially a case manager who's going to be delivering direct instruction, and that can be a little not ideal sometimes. And it's also, sometimes you do it, but I think when you don't have to, I think you avoid it.
Okay. And I guess my hope is that the Assistant Director of Pupil Services is going to sort of bolster all of that, so that maybe their support will have a ripple effect into down the line. Is that reasonable to hope?
I think there's a couple different things, and I want to make sure that the Assistant Director position isn't seen as a panacea. We don't want to oversell. I think that's the thing, right? Yeah. So 50% of that position is an existing position, which is currently we have a half-time position that is out-of-district case manager. So now that in this model, we would take that half-time position, we would roll it into this. We're also adding, in addition to that load, right now we have a person saying half-time is what you need in order to do all this work connected with out-of-district placement. This person also is going to take over some planning kind of responsibilities and project kind of work connected to counseling, nursing, and ELL at the same time. Now, some of this is going to be spread across the combination of the 2, both Dan and the assistant director. So I think what's important is the assistant director is not going to be providing direct service, right? So, and is not going to have outside of the out-of-district placement caseload, will not have will probably not have an in-building caseload that they're managing as well. So,
And it sounds like they're not necessarily working directly with case managers either. because they're taking on.
No,
these
I
other
think what
roles.
you're going to see is, I mean, our goal is as a department, is that we get to what we're doing is those folks are in a position to do more planning, you know, in terms of what do those next programs look like and what are we building? So we do have a role in this particular budget that is connected to in-district services connected to students who could, without it, transition out of district, and that's the RISE position at the middle school, which is specifically designed around creating an opportunity, a program in the schools that would not have students having to leave the district. The goal is now, and of course, you also have to remember, I mean, Dan just, you know, as Dan started building his budget, Dan's a couple months into being the director, too. So part of this is working as a department to then plan kind of the vision, not just the vision about what comes next. I think we know what that vision is. The vision is we're gonna build programs in schools that are probably, for example, we would build specialized programs, one in each of the elementary schools, and then bus kids across those different schools and staff them in that way. I mean, we've been having those conversations for a couple of years now about what that might look like. But it's going to be, how do you put that in place in Portsmouth on the ground? What's the personnel look like? What's the space look like? What are the transportation logistics? All those types of things. That will be things I think we're going to enhance that capacity by bringing on that other role. So. anyways.
Okay, I appreciate that, and it's helpful to know that you don't see it as sort of solving everything, but
I just think when we have that checklist of like ELL, nursing,
a lot of
counseling,
things.
out-of-district placement, and we're going to build programs, I just don't want, I don't want it to be like, all those things are going to be fixed like this by that person.
But I did gain some confidence from Dan Alexander that he has a plan in mind to, as moving forward, to start building our own programming and bringing kids back into districts.
Yeah, and I think I had a question from a board member about, you know, about programming. Are you looking at other models and that type of thing? I think each of the different administrators who have come to the district have come from places where those types of programs are not unusual. You know, and in Dan's experience, Nashua is a much bigger operation than we are. But they've done a lot of work over the years to build in-house programming specifically for those purposes. So I think there's an awareness of, I think there's a deep understanding of what those programs can look like and how they operate. Now it's just like having him on the ground, finishing out a year and being in a position to be like, okay, how are we starting to incrementally build that out over the next couple of years? So.
And I'll just say, I hope that we can help the city understand that this is a process that's going to take several years, but that we are moving in that direction of trying to keep kids in district and bolster our programs
And,
here.
and there's a bunch of reasons why when students go out, even when you build programs, there's a rebuilding thing, trust building opportunity. It has to happen with parents, because at one point you were sitting down across the table saying, we're not able to provide service to your student here. So now you go out, you relocate in another program, we help you get settled in that program, and then some time passes, and you hear public conversation about how expensive this all is. And then we're coming back to the table saying, hey, we might authentically be, we wouldn't do this unless we were authentically saying, we really think we have the thing now for your student that will allow them to be in their local school. But now you have to go through this rebuilding of trust that the institution can do what they need to do for my kid. And so all those will be challenging things. I think it is true that as we build, I think one of the expectations is it should be about, first and foremost, it's going to be about kids not having to go out in the first place. And that's going to be a future kind of stepping process. I think we will have some students as we do that will be in a position to bring back into the district and have families be excited and comfortable about doing that. But I think it's first and foremost it will be the retention of the students we have in taking care of those needs in-house. Yeah.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Yep.
I saw Jen's hand, and then Byron.
Yeah, it's just to kind of go off what Pip was saying. So when I hear you mention nursing, do you envision this person kind of case managing all the 504s that currently, I think, school counselors handle those?
No, not. I think what the bits that we're talking about right now in the short run on nursing, counseling, ELL is really around really kind of coordinating the existing folks who are on the ground to work or to develop kind of system-wide plans. So one of the things we talked about last year when we were talking about a full-on director of counseling, which was something that we had proposed and had gone to city council with, was that right now we have some very talented, highly trained folks who are in counseling, but we don't necessarily have one kind of philosophical concept of like what is our theory of action when it comes to counseling across the district. What are we trying to do? What are the programs we're using? How do those programs feed from one into another? It's not like we're wildly different, but we're not reading from the same lexicon on stuff. And so this will be a process in each of those different areas of trying to create alignment within those groups and having someone who is helping that planning process, developing those plans, and then that puts us in a position to then be moving people towards kind of training and practices and then an accountability within those areas in ways that we could be more effective at than we are right now.
Thank you. So this is my third time through with the budget, and I'm starting to, I think, maybe understand what's going on in year 3. And the reason I say that is because I'm starting to understand more what I'm not seeing in here, and sort of like what is missing in terms of the communication and the way to reason about some of these things. So I'll make another software analogy because that's just what I do. We write programs, and then we write other programs that test the programs that we write. And those other things, which are called tests, they will either fail or they will say that what your program is working as expected. And if those things are flaky, and as by flaky I mean like they are poorly written, so the actual test is poorly written, it's just noise, right? So when I look at this budget and I look at, these are small items, but in the Dondero operational budget, there's 2 line items, one for 1,500 and one for 3,000, that just have nothing next to them. There's just nothing there. So that doesn't give me a great deal of confidence in like what's laid out in front of me, and it feels a lot like noise and not a lot like signal. And so, some of the public comments around actuals, I think, speak to it's difficult to glean much when there's things like that in here, because it's hard to get a sense of what the actual spend is. That isn't to say I think that there's we're overspending, or it's sort of there's some sort of nefariousness. It's just hard to reason about, and it's hard to communicate to the public, I think, about the rationale for some of these things. I think what I want to know as like a taxpayer or any buyer of services is like, how much does it cost me, the taxpayer, because the dollar's out, right? And then what are the services I'm getting back on the other side? And there's a lot in that respect that's missing as well, as I've tried to think about specifically the special education services and the monies that we get back from the state, right? So that's also really hard to communicate to a taxpayer how much they're actually spending, right? Because there's the revenue side of this that isn't well articulated. And so that's another thing that I'm not seeing. So it's hard to differentiate the noise from signal in terms of the line items, and it's difficult to understand what like the actual dollar increase is going to be, right? I don't think that whether it's 4% or 6% increase, that people really understand what that's going to mean for their like bottom line at the end of the month, right? That I think is like a missing connect the dots situation. So I think that's 3 years in where I'm starting to feel like there could be great improvement just in articulation and communication of towards the public and towards us, the board, in terms of what we're looking at. And then I think, this is, last year there was 6 positions, this year it's 4.5 positions, so that's 10.5 positions in 2 years. that we're seeing reduced. And it's, you couple that with the frustration in terms of being able to reason about where the money is going because of the things I just mentioned, it's difficult to fight against that, right? It makes that, it makes that more difficult to talk about. So I think that's been my experience with the process this year as I'm sort of starting to understand some of the pieces here. So that was a statement. I have a question about the engineering design position. It's sort of at the top of the list in terms of the green sheets or whatever they're called. I want to understand more your understanding from the CTE department that the need for that position and like what the value would be and like if there's demand for it currently in that department.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we're one of the big conversations in well, let me actually, can I go back to your first set of comments?
Yeah.
So I would say I think one of the takeaways from me from this cycle. So the stuff you have in front of you, I think goes back the structure of this goes back like 3 business administrators, and that's not to. I just want to make sure it's not like a recent phenomenon. This is kind of what it's been.
Yeah.
But I agree. I mean, I think we've had people talk about, well, this is what Dover does, or this is what other people do. I think a takeaway for me is similar to experiences I've had in other places. The things that have been talked about in a couple different settings, when you're talking about now, that I think we should look at shifting in an upcoming cycle. One is, multiple years of actuals going back in particular line items, percentage increases from current to the next year. So, I've worked with boards in the past, and we always knew, similar to what was happening at the podium, that the conversation that we would have, particular board members who would go through, and all they looked at was the percentage on the thing. And even if it was, and Brian mentioned, like, it was $16, they didn't look whether it was, like, we went from $1 to $16. They'd be like, that's the percentage increase. And it's like, yes, but it's a really small amount of money, and let me tell you what that is. But it's a super valuable tool as a board member to be able to go through and be like, oh, well, let me identify the things that are up, that are down in a really easy way.
Yeah.
And then the other part that's, I think has been tricky here is we could be clearer about, we need to make visible revenue.
Yes.
It's got to be clear. It's got to be visible. So, so what are we doing? How many people are in? What's going on with each of the different grants? How are we paying for people or things? Where's that money coming into? What money is coming? What money directly offsets things here? What money goes right to the city? And that's a little bit more of a complicated picture than if we were in a standalone school district we were not connected to the city anyway. But I think all those things are important, and I think what you're saying about like the special ed conversation, and it's like, well, what's the net cost to, not what's the expense, but what's the net cost to the taxpayer once we do, because we do pursue all those reimbursements and whether it's Medicaid or it is SPED reimbursement from the state. We do all those things, but it's not easily visible here and understandable, dissectable, and then it's not in a place where it's easy to make judgments about. So I appreciate all those things, and I think one of the walk away from this kind of the conversation this year will be, so let's do it. The city's having a lot of conversation right now about the ERP system that they're bringing online, but that's a couple years out still. So I think when we think about if we're still in paper spreadsheet land next year, working off of Excel, we should have the ability to make the things you're talking about more transparent and understandable to the public and to you. And that will be a shift from what has been, I get the impression, decades worth of budget work at the school level in Portsmouth. But I think it's an appropriate step to take. All right, now back to the question. The finite question was on CTE. I think one of the conversations we're trying to have is that one of the challenges we're seeing at CTE, and we have a meeting coming up, advisory board meeting coming up with CTE, is we have folks in the community who are employers in the community who are clamoring for folks in the trades. But that program died years ago due to lack of student interest. And so we have a desire to bring back some of these things, but in some cases, we're trying to figure out to what extent if you build it, he will come, and to what extent we're reflecting the need on the ground. So we have, for example, a bunch of contractors who are like, I need employees, I need people who want to do that. And simultaneously, some of the conversation over the years, predates me, has been, we don't know that there'll be enough, that there wasn't, the program withered and died years ago. We don't know there's enough interest within the community of Portsmouth to maintain a full-on construction trades program that we could staff and that would have enough students involved to justify the position. So I think part of the strategy is, and we're not asking for it this time around, but part of the conversation has been that position gets us in that arena, on the adjacent to that arena, but also in a place where families who are in a mindset that I would say is a little bit old, that like my kid's going to a 4-year school and that's all there is, and we don't do these other things over here, that we're trying to find an entry point that will be acceptable to kids who are going to go directly out of our programming into, it could be to Great Bay, it could be directly into the workforce, and kids who still see themselves on a 4-year track as well. And I think that's part of the kind of ongoing conversation around that particular role, is that it might be just a sweet spot between those things that would address both of those needs at the same time. But I think we are months away from having a permanent director on the ground, and I think those are conversations that will continue when the permanent director comes. And I think that person, wherever they in conjunction with those advisory groups and with us, will come to certain conclusions, and I think they'll come with some type of robust presentation when we are at a point where we're ready to move in that direction.
Thank you.
Yep.
So Nathan?
Just to speak on that, because that's what we're focused on right now. I'd say it just goes back to last week's presentation at the core of just offering diverse opportunities to students. And there's no real data that you can take other than maybe a form before classes go out to say how many students would be interested. And I also hear the point to having a new director, they may have more interest in that and bringing that into, but right now we don't know. So for that, I can look past that position. But the more anecdotal comment that I have with all of this is being on for multiple budget cycles now, trying to evaluate. In the past, we've said no to a numerous amount of positions, but I think that every single position that was proposed has a meaning behind it, even though we were able to shift something around. So I just want the board to truly think about what would have a more short and long-term impact for students at our schools if there were other positions included. And I tie it back to the Assistant Director of People Services. From the descriptions that were given of that position in prior meetings, I just don't, maybe that just is me not having enough knowledge into what that position truly entails, and I know it was mentioned tonight, but I just want the board to truly look at it in a big picture, and that although case managers, maybe if we mended it into one, the benefit that students would have from that, it also being a lower percentage added. So just something to think about with you all making this decision tonight.
Any other questions, comments? Steve?
Just a couple. One comment was just that, I appreciate the comments about being concerned about out-of-district placement that were made publicly. It does feel to me that the RISE teacher position does that very directly, that will be very helpful. And I do think the Assistant Director of Pupil Services will help to steer us in the right direction in terms of reducing out-of-district placement. So both of these positions, I do think, are in the right step. I appreciate the comment that was made about looking at having the 3 elementary schools kind of look at sharing services. I mean, from my perspective, that would be a really worthwhile thing to explore. And I'm interested in knowing a lot more specifics about what that would look like down the road. The one thing that we haven't done, which was pointed out, was we haven't really gone through all the line items in here. I realize that if you look at percentage increases, just as you said, Dr. McLaughlin, sometimes the $6,000 can look like a 70% increase, and you're looking at a very small percentage, a very small amount of money in this large budget. But we haven't gone through item by item for all the increases. If you can see the changes by just looking at one year to the other. I do think it would be helpful to have the changes written there. In my mind, not percentage, but just the dollar increase is much more valuable, because if it's a $10,000 increase, that's one thing. If it's a $50 increase, I don't care if it's 100%, I don't know if it's worthwhile going through this in terms of some of the larger increases in terms of the items. That would obviously delay the process, but that's the only thing that it feels to me like we haven't done.
Thank you. So I think I would say to everyone, tonight is the night. So if there's a line item that you want to have a discussion about, you should call it out and ask the questions here. If we opt not to vote on the budget tonight, we would be back in 1 week to do it, because we do have a timetable to get a proposal to the City Council. You are certainly more than welcome to call out any particular line item that you would like. And if there's any positions that you want to have a bigger discussion about whether there is merit in considering adding those, we can certainly have that discussion. So I would encourage people to take a beat and ask your questions, because we would like to make sure that everybody's able to make a decision that they feel comfortable making. So we need to have a minute.
And
I would certainly entertain more questions.
And I would just say, and if that's, depending on where we go, if we're going to get into, there's a good possibility if we're going to get into all the different line item stuff, then we're just going to take a list from you tonight and then come back with material. If you ask me about one of 200 pages in one line, I may or may not be able to give you the specifics as to why something is up $700 tonight. So I'm happy to, we will most likely be in a position where we will need to collect all those questions again, go back to staff, rework those conversations, come back to you in a way that's easy to understand.
I don't think there's that many line items that are of significant dollar amounts that have changed when I went through here. As I went through and I highlighted everything that was, when I say significant, I mean like $5,000, $10,000 change. There's not many of those sort of line items in here. This other small changes, I think, are insignificant from my point of view.
I would say from the operating side of the budget, we cut pretty severely our operating budget last year to make the number that we needed to hit.
Right.
And some of those increases are pretty much bringing back what they weren't able to buy last year. And some of it was important things. Some of it was books. A lot of that was that's a majority. It's not all of it, but it's a majority of it was things that they were bringing back from last year. Some of them put off replacement of equipment that we really needed. Some of it was Promethean boards, things like that. We took that off the table last year, and we put it back on this year.
Right, and some of them, when I looked through here, were things like, so for instance, just for example, in Dondero, you had instructional supplies increased by about $10,000. A lot of that was related to, some were the consumables, but then there were several, the only thing that's unfortunate, there were just a few things that were not identified in that list. And somehow that got missed on the budget, and those were a few $1,000s. But the rest of the budget was clear. So again, my trust is that those were things that were instructionally needed. But you did have, that's where the large increase occurred in Dondero. The middle school, which was the other one that was pointed out, you had another $10,000 increase in instructional supplies, which was that was fairly significant. And
On that one, though, they also took a $5,000 cut.
okay, and then the other was instructional books was the really large increase. And I assume that was something that was needed for instruction. I just didn't question it earlier because I figured that was needed for the program.
Yes, the Amplify Math alone was about a $10,000 increase, plus IM student and teacher workbooks, which was new. Also, they had, the other increase they had is they needed support for the outdoor classroom this year, so that was $18,000. That was added in for that. Well, last year I completely cut out their classroom projectors, and this year I brought back, it says 23, but it's not 23, it's about, I think we got it down to about 8 or 9 that we'll be replacing this year, so.
That is something, the projector conversation has been one that we've been having for a while.
Long before I got here.
So the projectors are the you know, oh my God, what's the name of them?
Overhead, like the,
I know, what's the name of them?
I can't remember.
But the LCD projectors, right? And so when the middle school, when the reno happened at the middle school, it was all set up. It was like the newest technology, and we had all the LCD projectors in there. In other parts of the district, we have moved to Promethean boards. We've been slowly replacing things over time and moving towards Prometheans. The middle school has worked really hard to try to, I think there's been a preference to maintain the equipment they have, and actually they've been very creative over the years. I think Phil they found something it was like in Singapore, and they got all the bulbs, you know, for a third of the price. So they've been working really hard to try to keep that technology afloat. And we did bypass them last year on that request.
Yep,
so.
and I know they've already lost a couple more this year, just popped and went. So.
But once we move into Promethean boards, the initial upfront cost is, you know, it's significant. And so some of this is their preference around what structural technology they want, and also a little bit of a holding pattern, because we know once we dive into a whole scale switch out for Promethean boards that it will be, you know, it's going to be a big bite of the apple when we go that direction.
Can you talk a little bit more about the outdoor classroom at the Portsmouth Middle School?
Yeah, so the outdoor classroom is a program, actually. This is the support of the program. So this is eighth grade students go to, so when you see it on here, it looks like, oh, we have an outdoor classroom. Where is that outdoor classroom? Is it by the library? Why does it cost $18,000? So this is a program that's all eighth graders, correct? Right? Mm-hmm. All eighth graders, they go up, they do multiple nights up in, trying to think of the town. Is it Franklin?
That way.
Okay,
yeah.
but it's at a camp on a lake. They do a bunch of outdoor adventure stuff, team building. Multiple teachers are up there, and so this is to make sure that there isn't. What we're trying to do is some of the cost of that was covered by significant parent output, you know, in order to make that work. And Portsmouth, we're a place where we don't hesitate to ask parents to send in checks for individual students to do things. And I've come from a place where, you know, we don't run those programs if we have to ask for big dollar amounts from families. But in particular, I think this is something that the middle school feels really passionate about. Phil feels really passionate about. I got a chance to go up this year while they were doing it and kind of walk the camp with Phil. And it was amazing. And so they're renting the space for the camp. They work with a third-party group who coordinates all of the kids. Teachers there on site to help. They're staying up, you know, all night in the cabin with kids, and they're dealing with all those types of things. But we also are working with this group. I'm trying to think of the name. But it's this multi-day experience that I think on the back end you hear kids, parents, staff rave about as this like really important kind of life moment for kids. So that's where where that's coming from, and it offsets a bunch of money that was coming. I think was coming from. Were you guys when you were doing?
Well, a lot of this is scholarships for kids that obviously can't afford it.
Yeah.
But there's also a lot of support that goes along with it, which is, because they want to make sure every kid can go, every student can go, regardless of the challenges they have. So we either have to, we send usually a few paras up there. We also send a nurse usually because you'll have students with some medical issues.
So so there's overnight costs associated with the staff.
But most of this goes towards scholarships and offsetting the cost to make it somewhat affordable.
So there is parent payment as well as the 18,000?
We've had parent pay, I feel like we still did parent payment even this time around. We're still doing parent payment with offsets from the Opportunity Fund.
This definitely does not cover the entire expense.
That's what I wondered. So there's no place I can walk into and see this outdoor classroom?
Not here. You can't walk over to the library, but I would say it, and it might be right up your alley next year, assuming that we're in a position to do it. I encourage board members to come up and check out what it is because it's a really powerful experience for kids.
They used to send the entire 8th grade to New York City, which was substantially much more expensive, and over time, I think, felt like it was having added cost and decreased educational value, even though it was a ton of fun for the kids. And I think, what was it, maybe 2 years ago, that Phil Davis pivoted away from the New York City trip to do this outdoor education experience where they really are doing like a lot of,
that's neat.
Like they do some science activities in the woods and they go hiking and they really do make it accessible to every single kid. So there's some fundraising from the PTA and they've also subsidized it so that the cost to parents isn't prohibitive for most families who are contributing towards the cost.
And we do have, and we do continue to use, within the district, we have a fund, the Opportunity Fund, which is available for families who need help with these types of opportunities too. So we also utilize that to help offset costs for families in need.
I noticed at the high school, one of the large increases was related to the NUVU engineering curriculum, which I assume is somehow related to the desire to bring engineering and curriculum to the high school in some way. That was listed both last year and this year, but it's gone up, and that was part of the large increase for curriculum at the high school.
The NULU work, this is all the design.
This is all the design thinking.
So we have a relationship with this organization, and they, can you speak to it in probably more detail with it?
So we do have a relationship with an organization, NUVU, which has some schools set up in, I think, outside of Boston, Massachusetts, where students actually go through design and iterations to design things and really think about unique ways to solve problems. And it's a way of bringing in engineering, but more about design thinking, where students are living out what the indicators are for the portrait of a graduate more directly, and trying to address problems in the community. And so that is something that continues to gain traction with the teachers, with the students, and different ways to provide entry points for students into those kinds of experiences.
And part of that has been bringing teams to professional development opportunities.
To be trained, yep.
To work with staff around how do you take kind of design thinking and put it into how can that go into your math program? So how do you make your math class more tangible, more real-world problem-based? How do you do, with social studies? And if you go into some of the social studies classes now, what you'll see, it was just in the other day, and freshmen were finishing up their semester, and they had worked around the UN goals for global development, and they had identified a goal. Part of what they had to do was they didn't just give a report like, the environment, I'm worried about that. It was like, here's this issue, here's my potential solution to the issue. They had to create a prototype that was connected to it, and so a lot of them had sometimes some of them had created websites, somebody created an app that I was working with a kid on, a lot of different, here's my cardboard model of this device that I have, and I think this is why this would work. in terms of this particular issue, and it wasn't just the environment, it dealt with imbalances between the North and the South in terms of the global economy and all these types of things. So anyways, it's just one example of where we've been bringing these teams to that experience and really working with them about like, how do you do this work and how do you have it permeate across the building in different ways? And how do we evolve what we're doing and having it be less kind of stand and deliver kind of, high school class? And how do you turn all of these experiences, as much as possible, keep turning them into, how do you make this relevant and hands-on and problem solving while still trying to hit those skills and knowledges that you want kids to have. So it's been a good partnership over the last couple of years.
Do you have other questions?
No, I mean, what I'm hearing is that all these increases were partly related to what Brian was saying, that last year when you had to make cuts, you did cut significantly into some of the operating budget, which then, and part of it is related to, again, working to support quality curriculum initiatives such as outdoor classrooms and Nouveau, so that all these larger increases that you see in here are things that were reviewed and were supported because they support quality education. That's what I'm hearing.
I mean, we definitely go line by line, we look at the actuals, we have the conversations as we go. But I appreciate what we were talking about with Byron before, making that, as we go forward, making that more accessible to you. Have those same conversations that we're having when we're having those conversations with the principals and directors, and make sure that you, I like writing the program that tests the program. That as a concept and putting you in a position where you can be an effective tester. But I think as you probe these things, what Brian talked about last year was an atypical, for people who are new to the board, it was an atypical season for us in a bunch of ways. Our normal kind of meeting pattern got disrupted. There was just a lot that was not typical in that, and so that led us very late in the season where people were, I think school was just about over, and we were like, basically from the situation with the council was like, well, this is the money you got to just figure it out. Mm-hmm. And then people went away for the summer, and we had to figure it out over the summer, like, what do we got? Not gutting, that makes it dramatic, but what are we significantly scaling back that people left for the summer thinking they were going to be able to have in what they were in their operating budgets in order to do the things they needed to do. And I spent the first couple weeks when we got back with people coming to my office being like, where did the $5,000 go that I needed for the debate club that we agreed we needed in order to go to these 5 more events and to do this other thing? And I'm like, I know, and I'm sorry, but we don't have it. And so we're going to have to figure it out for another year, and hopefully we can do it the next time around. There were a lot of those conversations with a lot of people internally who were surprised and as they came back, and really, disappointed that they had put a lot of thought into what their operating stuff should be, and they had existing operating that had rolled for multiple years. They always had utilized, and we just, did the best we could with what was a tough situation in terms of what we got dealt, and the timing in which it happened. So,
I think part of our intention in presenting a budget for approval that's at 4.48%, when we know that just our continuing services budget to change nothing would be about 6.13. We're trying to be sensitive to the concerns of our community and our taxpayers, and we tried to get as creative as we could in identifying some efficiencies so that we could reduce full-time headcount by about 4.5 positions total.
Yeah.
So we're hoping that with that we can get a budget through, that we ultimately are able to have the stability to plan. Because if we approve this budget tonight and then it goes through the process to get approved by the city, and then they come back to us at the end of our cycle for hiring and they give us a different number, then we're in a position where either we've hired people that we don't have an easy way to pay for, or we've waited to hire until kind of the end of the school year recruiting season, because we want to be abundantly cautious. So that's the balancing act that we're kind of trying to strike every year. So I think at least from my perspective, I see the beginnings of an effort towards bolstering special education services in the district, which is a question that we've had loud and clear over several budget cycles from a lot of different folks. And I can see with the RISE position at PMS adding a special education teacher potentially that would work with children on a lot of the behavior and dysregulation issues that may potentially cause them to need additional services that we can't provide, and instead try to take a preventive approach to providing those services. And I can also see with the Assistant Director of Pupil Services the potential to combine a previous position managing the out-of-district special education and also try to provide more cohesion to a lot of the other student support services. I definitely hear that we have a longer conversation to have, which when we get later into the agenda to talk about our retreat in May, I think that could potentially be a good moment for us to take a step back and think strategically about if we had a 5 or 10-year plan for adding programs or people to really do a deep dive on special education. That could potentially be one avenue that we could explore during our retreat. But I think from my perspective, the question tonight is, do we feel comfortable putting forward this budget as proposed? And if yes, I think that we should take that vote. And if there's any other information that anyone wants that they think we should send folks back to the drawing board and come back one more time next Tuesday, we can certainly do that. But I just want to make sure that if we're voting on it, that people feel good about what we're putting forward. And if there's any additional questions, we should articulate those and come back next Tuesday. So I guess I would ask, Nancy, go ahead.
I'm looking at this green paper, which looks blue to me, but anyway.
It is blue.
Because it is blue.
It is blue.
And I'm just looking at the engineering design CTE, or I'm looking at the case manager at Little Harbor, the case manager at Dondero. If we were to combine that, what if we added either of those? So let's say we're at 4.48, if we add 0.15% for the engineering design person, that brings us up to 4.63%, which gives us a budget of $70,284,000, blah, blah, blah. Or if we decided to do the case manager and just hire one that would split between Little Harbor and Dondero, we would just add a 0.16, which would take us to 4.64, and I didn't do the 70 million part of it. The discussion about the CTE or the case manager at the elementary seems like something that keeps coming back. So if we added just that tiny bit more, are we still in the ball game, do you think?
You know, I think Lisa was talking to this, and I think one of the things we're trying to do is, we want to be respectful of and I know you believe this too. We want to be respectful of the taxpayer and the increases that people could potentially face, but I just have concerns that if we go into, I really would love to be in a position where where city staff feels like they could support us, full-throated support us. Yes, we agree. Here's the council. Here's the school's proposal. We agree with the school board, and going to. And I don't know that this is not a guarantee that this would happen, but we decrease that possibility when we add additional things beyond where we're at. And what I don't want to have from an operational perspective, I want to increase the possibility that we have a really good sense of what we might be able to do hiring-wise, like no later than April, because we're going to miss the window on hiring people. And if we're in a little bit of if we're really nervous that we could be facing an additional significant decrease in the number of people that work for us, then that puts us in a really difficult operating kind of situation in the spring. So I just get nervous about that. So I'm, especially on the heels of last budget season, which was hard for staff. I would love to put us in a position that created the highest likelihood of a calm budget season that people were in agreement with, that kind of moved us ahead. So I guess that's the best I can do to answer that one.
I think I have one follow-up question about that. which is, I wonder, do we feel like the caseload that our case managers have right now is a caseload that they're able to manage? I mean, I guess I'm just curious, are we thinking about those extra case manager positions as we anticipate more students coming in down the line and we want to build capacity? Or are we thinking about that in terms of we already have case managers who have too heavy a load and they could spend more time with kids if we had another one?
So I want to be really...
To me, that's like a different question.
I want to be really respectful of our case managers, and I live in a household with a person who spent a lot of time in their career being a case manager, and I know the work is exceedingly challenging. I think the folks who work in our special education roles are underpaid in most cases. They have some of the most challenging jobs in the district, so I really respect and appreciate the work they do. I would say within, and I don't have the numbers with me right now, but I would say the conclusion was that within kind of the industry right now and what's happening regionally, that the caseloads people had we felt were fair. And so I cringe at thinking of case managers watching me and thinking of, well, where's the help, McLaughlin? But at the same time, I think the conclusion was that at the moment we should be able to get by with the loads that we have. They are challenging, and we appreciate the work people are doing, but we wouldn't take that additional step right now.
Steve?
Yeah, I have to say, I mean, being a case manager is an incredibly tough job. I really admire them for the work they do. My thought on that is I really like to get to know exactly what we're going to do in terms of the special ed program before we hire for this position, so that we have a very clearly well-designed program. We may be looking at something very specific at each elementary school, so rather than hire a generic case manager, I feel like if we wait, I'd love to see these be priorities. Personally, I think they should be priorities next year, but they should be priorities for a very specifically well-thought-out, crafted program to reduce, to provide better programming for our special ed kids in school.
And I would say if we would make the decision now just to decrease caseloads, it makes it, that might be an FTE that we can look at next year, but it makes it less likely if we go for it this year, that then we have, I agree with what you're saying, which is bring on an additional person specifically connected to a design of a program that's going to help us with these other issues that we're thinking about strategically. And I don't think that as presented, these are there.
But that will also reduce caseload for these case managers.
Yes.
Brian, you've been quiet.
Yeah, I think, I was listening to the conversations. I think every year we go through this process, we learn a little bit more about what we should be doing better for the next process.
Of course.
But I do think a lot of thought has been put into this budget, and I think it's a reasonable, it's really a balanced way of looking at it. I wish we were able to get a little bit more, but I know that there's a lot of challenges this year in particular. So I feel like the 4.48 is a really the best balance that we can get. And then operationally, I know for a fact that sort of got the rug pulled out from underneath us, and trying to put that back, I think is a responsible way to do it this year. So I would support it at that rate. I wouldn't support any additional increases at this point. And that's just my take on it.
Anyone else? So the motion on the table right now is to take a vote to approve the budget for fiscal year 27 at a 4.48% increase over the previous year. If you have no other discussion, I'm happy to put it to a vote.
Okay. To approve the 4.48% budget for fiscal year 27. Brian French,
Yes.
Lisa Rappaport,
Yes.
Nancy Claiberg,
Yes.
Lee Hudson, I'll come back to him.
Sorry,
Jennifer Sch-
struggling to unmute. Yes.
Yes, thank you. Jennifer Shump,
Yes.
Pip Clues,
Yes.
Stephen Adler,
Yes.
Byron Maddow.
No.
The vote is 7-1. Approved.
Thank you, everyone. All right, so next up, we have a discussion and motion to redefine 3 of our board committees. There is a table in the board packet that details in red all of the changes in our school board committees. And the intention of this was to make clear which committees require a chair who is a member of the board and require public notice and agendas and minutes, and to distinguish those more clearly from some of the school district committees where the intention is more as a vehicle for the board to receive information from staff in the district about various things that are going on. And what you all are being asked to vote on is the change in the mission of some of the committees, the establishment under new business of a few new committees, but in terms of the actual people who are serving on the committees, that can change later. That doesn't require a board vote. So you're just being asked to approve the structure of those committees. And I can talk about that a little bit more in detail, but I will first ask if I can have a motion to redefine the mission of the policy, facility, and finance committees.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Thank you. So the rationale for doing this was to accomplish a couple of things. It was, one, to make clear that these 3 committees would be doing the fundamental work of the board, which is overseeing policy, overseeing our budget, and overseeing sort of long-term facilities planning and strategic planning. And what you will see lower down in the table in the packet is we've looked to remove some committees that were previously ad hoc committees, like the redistricting committee, the future building needs committee, and roll those up into the work of facilities. We also thought it would make sense to pause on the ad hoc legislative committee and roll that work into being sort of an advisory piece of the policy committee conversation. And we also wanted to change the frequency of some of those committees so that they'd meet monthly and be an opportunity for us, for example, in finance, to have an ongoing year-long conversation about what potential things we might want to do with our budget, how we might want to tweak our budget process potentially going forward. So that was the intention for that one. So I don't know if anyone has any questions about the changes or any discussion, but I would certainly say, speak now. Pip?
I'm not sure that it matters for the sake of this vote, but I thought I'd mention that because we just decided on it this morning for the policy committee that our meetings will be every other Tuesday at 9 a.m. I know that not every one of these is totally accurate in
I
there.
would say
but-
many of them are not,
Yeah, okay.
because once the committees are confirmed, then the next step will be people will need to go and set a new meeting time.
Okay, so
based
maybe
on
we
the
can just update
numbers.
that
So we
later.
will definitely need to update the table, and I will get to that under new business in terms of what we want to do next with the committees, because I'd like to have everyone be able to convene with their group, come up with a meeting time, and report back so that we can update this so it's accurate.
I do have a comment about the facilities one as well.
Sure, go ahead.
I just wanted to add, in terms of my understanding of what that committee had originally been intended for, I wondered if we could add, maybe where it says meet to discuss facility needs, add a comma and current projects, and then long-term planning as related to the budget. Because I think one of the things that we've been missing out on is sort of having a role in the development of projects and keeping abreast of those in the way that we used to. And I think I would also try to add, the boards could, or, I'm sorry, the members could act as liaisons between the board and the facilities staff, or, if that's the
Okay.
intention. I think that was the intention previously, and I don't want to lose that, that purpose for the board, or for the committee.
Okay, so I think the one request was to add, just in the description of the facilities committee, meet to discuss facility needs, and then add and current projects there.
Exactly.
Okay. And then to the second question, I think the intention for all of our board committees where there is a board member who is chair, is the board member as chair would be able to add things to the agenda, would be able to invite guests to speak at the committee, and that the person who is working for the district who's convening it would ultimately be putting together that agenda packet and getting it to our administrators to post, and making sure that kind of the trains run on time, so that we have good accountability and complying with RSA in terms of right to know and keeping all of that on the up and up.
Yep.
But that definitely the intention would be that the board member who is chair would be helping to steer that agenda. Also going back to the committee, so for example, if we are at a board meeting and somebody says, oh, I'd really like the facilities committee to look again at the modulars, or look again at playgrounds, or whatever it is, that would be something that the board member who chairs could take that back to the committee to discuss on that
Okay,
agenda.
so,
Does
so
that,
essentially that's built into the.
Correct.
The role of the chair. Okay, yes, then that makes sense.
so you would like to just make that one change to the
Yeah, just the,
facilities committee
the
description?
current,
Okay.
current projects.
Any other discussion? So I don't think we necessarily need an amendment just to make those two words be added to it. Unless there are any objections, I think we can just put it to a vote.
Sorry, are we talking, I thought we were just talking about those three at first.
Correct.
We're talking about the whole thing?
The motion is just for those three.
I have one comment on something
Okay,
later.
the motion on the table right now is to redefine the mission of the Facilities, Policy, and Finance Committee as detailed in the packet, and with the one revision now that you just suggested. Roll call?
Pip Clues,
Yes.
Jennifer Shump,
Yes.
Stephen Adler,
Yes.
Byron Matto,
Yes.
Brian French,
Yes.
Lisa Rappaport,
Yes.
Nancy Kleberg,
Yes.
Lee Hudson.
Yes.
Approved.
Thank you. Now, under new business, we have a little bit of out of order, but the board retreat is up first on the agenda. So I would say for that we haven't had a chance yet to really kick around exactly what the makeup of the retreat would be, but we'd like to hear from board members what types of long-term projects you might like to discuss at the retreat. And if you can get back to us maybe by a month from today, that should give us plenty of time to come up with an agenda that is a productive conversation. And I mean, speaking just for myself, I would encourage folks to think about what are some of the systemic conversations that come up over and over again that we might, as a group, want to try to take that time to think through and solve and be strategic about, especially when things come up in these meetings and we don't necessarily have the time to really devote to work through how we can improve or how we can plan for the long term. And I saw your hand, Nancy, so
Yes,
go ahead.
I cannot make that date. I can't
It's
make.
your schedule. I literally approved your schedule, Nancy.
I'm not available on that date, sorry, I'm away. I don't know if you wanted, you don't have to change it if you don't want to, but I can't be there.
Let's circle back on that. But
When I saw that,
I
I went,
literally
oh my
sat in the
God.
planning meeting and said, Nancy made this schedule, I will keep it. I will not mess with the schedule for the rest of this year. Okay. All right, well, we will, we'll see what we can do about that. Any other questions about the retreat at this time? So I would say, please, if you have ideas or suggestions, email myself and Brian, and we will probably kick that around. Please get it to us in the next month, and that should give us plenty of time to plan. But I'd say think strategic, long-term things that we need to iron out, and that would probably make it a very productive conversation. And now we're back to committees again. So under new business, or wait, sorry, Zach, I skipped over. We have the consideration and approval of leave of absence.
Yes, and so you have the letter, for those who have not been on the board before, the extensions of this type are ultimately things the board needs to make a decision on. This is a unpaid leave that would cover the 26-27 school year. If you haven't been on the board before, usually this is something where I give you an endorsement or not. I do endorse this request from this particular staff member, where they would go out in May, but they would then be out on unpaid leave for the 26-27 school year to return in 27-28.
Move to approve.
Second?
Roll call vote, please.
Okay. Jennifer Shump,
Yes.
Pip Clues,
Yes.
Stephen Adler,
Yes.
Byron Maddow,
Yes.
Brian French,
Yes.
Lisa Rappaport,
Yes.
Nancy Claiberg,
Yes.
and Lee Hudson.
Yes.
Approved.
Thank you. All right, next up is the school board meeting schedule for the upcoming school year, which does have a date for next year's retreat in it. Can I take a motion to approve that, please? Or actually, that's just a report, never mind. So take a look at that. If there's any dates where people have a substantial conflict, we can revisit it. But we did our best to stick pretty closely to the calendar around the school vacation breaks on the same cadence that we had this year. And if there's any issues, let us know and we'll try to adjust it. Now, committees. So under new business, there are two new committees that I was proposing to create to address strategic planning focus areas 2 and 3. We previously had a committee set up to address strategic plan focus area 1 around curriculum and instruction, but no committee for the other 2 areas, and that felt like a little bit of a gap to me. And so that was the intention in creating those committees, was to have a vehicle for the board to have sort of periodic updates on each of the areas of the strategic plan. So that was the purpose. The proposals are in the packet. I would make a motion to create 2 new strategic planning committees as detailed in the board packet for focus area 2, building educator capacity, and focus area 3, safety, well-being, and belonging. Would anyone second that? Yep, thank you. And then is there any discussion or questions on those new committees? Pip?
Yeah, I just wanted to understand the description of the role or the purpose of them is update on progress, update on PD, et cetera. So as I understood it, the Teaching and Learning Committee there's a Teaching and Learning Committee that consists only of staff, or I don't know if it's called that. It's the Focus Area 1 group, I guess, that does the work of that focus area, as far as I understand, and then they meet and report to the committee.
So that committee has been more just a report committee. I don't know if there's a separate group of people throughout the district that are in teams handling the day-to-day work on this.
So there's a lot of day-to-day work going on. When we initially approved the strategic plan a couple of years ago, we had talked about steering committees for the focus areas. And after the first year with Focus Area 1, we decided that the steering committee was not the way to go with things because the work was so broad and so deep, we weren't getting anything done in steering committees, and instead, the curriculum folks were leading the work, and then we were working together as a team in my office to sort of put the work out, bring the work back, and decide on the movement forward. So it's really the work that's being done at the building levels, and then when we meet for Focus Area 1, the Teaching and Learning Subcommittee, we talk about what's been going on and give a report on where we are with that progress in regards to the goals and objectives set for that focus area.
Okay, so that portion of it is essentially a reporting.
Yes.
Okay, so I guess that's what I'm trying to understand is, are these new committees specifically for reporting and just sort of keeping the board informed of what's happening, or are they for actually doing work around that focus area?
I believe the intention was more for reporting purposes.
Okay. So is there a reason that we wouldn't have them report to the whole board? If those people are gonna have to be available to report? I guess it just, to me, it feels a little bit like we're adding committees just to take reports and bring them back to the board.
I think that the intention with the Teaching and Learning Committee that we've been on is those have been pretty rich conversations, I think, and really helpful for us as board members to understand what's been going on throughout the district. And I would certainly be happy to consider an alternative approach, but I think that part of the concern was bringing staff to the board multiple times a year at night to report out, as opposed to meeting them in the middle of their workday as an ongoing conversation, and then bringing those presentations into the board packet so people have all of that information. And I think our intention was that maybe once or twice a year they could come to the board, so that the whole board would have an opportunity to have those conversations, but to not have them coming quite so frequently to the board, and instead have those conversations happen during their workday as more of a periodic update.
Okay, and the intention of the reporting to certain board, to the one or two board members on the committee would be that that board member would be able to update the rest of the board on what they're doing?
Correct.
Okay. So I guess I wondered if there was a way for the board members to have more of a role in what's happening rather than just receiving reports on what's happening. Or am I just not quite understanding what goes on at those meetings? I mean, is there a back and forth, or is it really just a reporting to the board members?
So as I can speak for teaching and learning, because we've been doing that now for a few years, is we do have conversations about what's happening. Questions are asked, we give answers to that. It really is a way to deliver information in sort of an informal setting where the conversation can flow more like a conversation instead of a formal, what we did last Tuesday, for instance.
Right, okay.
Very formal presentation, a lot of questions, trying to get through a lot of information, one time only, sort of what we used to call, back when I was doing observations, the dog and pony show, where you can actually sit down and have those conversations, say, okay, give me more information about that, what's going on, I'm hearing this, or can you give us more information about that thing, so that we can then periodically, and I think they're proposed to be 3 times a year, talk about where is the progress in relation to the goals and objectives that are set for those strategic plan areas that are on the website. Because at the beginning of every year, we review those. At the end of every year, we set new ones. We review them at the beginning of the year to say, okay, this is what we're working on this year. Where are we in relation to what we need to do or what we've already done? And that's sort of the measuring stick that's being used.
Okay. I realize it's sounding like I'm being very negative about this, but I'm not meaning to be. I appreciate the concept of having a committee for each of the focus areas. I think that makes a lot of sense. I just wanted to make sure I understood where the updates were coming, which direction the updates were coming, and what the format was for those.
I see Brian, and then I see Jen and Steve down there.
So I just want to address your question too. I do think it didn't feel one-sided. We did those conversations. A lot of it was like, we had suggestions on how to communicate things and like the strategy. So it was not one-sided. It wasn't just a report. And I think it was actually really good dialogue.
Great.
So.
Thank you.
I'm just looking at the language below for the new educator capacity. So it's the way the wording, I think I like it because it says meet to discuss district efforts towards the plan. So it almost feels like, why couldn't we mirror that wording so it's a little bit more of like a meeting to discuss the district efforts to support focus area 1. And so I just thought it would be nice to kind of look at that wording because it does feel kind of one-sided when I first read it. So I'm glad to hear from Brian that there is dialogue because I think that's important. So that would just be one suggestion, would maybe if we tweak some of the wording so it's more of like a meet to discuss.
So, I'm sorry, I just want to be clear on what you're asking to tweak. So the committees in red are the two new ones. The teaching and learning one was established previously.
Yeah, so
And
right
that
under,
language is from when that motion passed to establish that committee. So which one did you want to?
so I like the
tweak?
language of the new educator capacity to kind of like mirror up with the teaching and learning one. Does that make sense? Did I make it more confusing?
No, I understand what you're saying. I'm just looking at it. Okay.
You wouldn't take the exact like verbiage, you would tweak it so it's more of like meet to discuss, you know.
Let me ask you something, because the motion on the table is for the two new committees. So if we can just separate that question, and then I'm happy to come back to it.
Okay.
Just because we're looking at creating the two new committees, and then if you want to come right back to that
Got
other
it.
one and change that, we can certainly entertain a motion to do that. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I'm sorry, to that end though, could we make the wellness one match the educator capacity one, like she's suggesting?
Yeah. That is, okay. I'm just looking.
I think that would just help clarify the intention.
Mhm.
These three committees will have sort of similar purposes.
Yep, I think that's absolutely fine. So you want to just change the wording for the strategic plan focus area 3 to mirror what we have right now for focus area 2.
Right.
Right, okay. And so I think the first part, yeah, meet to
Obviously,
discuss
has to be-
district-wide efforts related to strategic plan goals for safety, well-being, and belonging would be how that second one would read.
Exactly.
And then periodic, it just wouldn't be the educator capacity, would be periodic updates to the board on those initiatives. Is something like that what you're looking for?
Yeah.
Okay.
Is that what you're looking for?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was saying, like they should be
Okay.
very similar, yeah.
I think that makes sense. We can certainly adjust that. Any other discussion or questions on those?
Are we looking for members for these two new committees?
We had penciled in some members based on some requests, so I think that you and Pip ended up on safety and wellness because you had previously asked about the wellness committee. But we can adjust the members. We are looking for 2 members. I think we penciled in some people based on how many committees everybody had, but we can certainly adjust that if we need to. Any other? I think we can take a roll call vote on that.
Okay. Brian French,
Yes.
Byron Matto,
Yes.
Stephen Adler,
Yes.
Pip Blues,
Yes.
Jennifer Shump,
Yes.
Lisa Rappaport,
Yes.
Nancy Claiberg.
Yes.
Lee Hudson.
Yes.
Passed.
Okay, so Jen, if you wanted to make a motion to change the language on the,
I only brought it up because she was,
no, you're welcome
Okay.
to. I just wanted to separate it because the previous motion was only related to the other 2 committees. That was
Got it.
all.
yeah,
Did you want to?
yes, I want to make a motion.
Second it.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, you'd like to make a motion to?
To adjust the wording for teaching and learning committee to match the other committees.
Do we have a second?
Yeah, I second that we add
Okay.
that we add the language, meet to discuss to that one as well.
Okay, so just so we're clear on what we're changing, we want to say meet to discuss district-wide efforts related to strategic plan goals for teaching, I'm sorry, just, it would be district strategic plan goals for focus area 1, rigorous and aligned K-12 curriculum. Does that satisfy what you're looking for?
And then would we keep the rest of what's there?
Hold on.
I think it might be worth, just my 2 cents, I think it'd be worth keeping the rest of what's there, since
Yep.
we already
Yeah, it does
identified
cover a
that.
lot.
Did the
And
makers
recommend-
of the motion feel comfortable keeping the rest and just adding that new? Okay. Any other discussion? Roll call vote.
Jennifer Shump,
Yes.
Pip Blues,
Yes.
Stephen Adler,
Yes.
Byron Matto,
Yes.
Brian French,
Yes.
Lisa Rappaport,
Yes.
Nancy Claiberg,
Yes.
Lee Hudson.
Yes.
Passed.
Thank you. Okay, so we had one additional subcommittee proposal that we discussed in the policy committee today. I will turn that over to Pip to discuss.
Point of order, I just wanted to know, are we going to talk about the working groups as well? Are we going, we have a working group that was added. I guess it was already voted
The
on, so maybe
community
we're not.
engagement working group was previously passed by the board, so that's,
We're just leaving that as is for today.
Yes.
We're not turning it into a committee.
I don't believe the working group has met yet. The intention was for them to
Okay.
meet and come back to the board with a proposal for a committee if they think that that's the way to go with it.
Okay, thank
That
you.
was previously approved. I just put it in red so that folks would see that it was new from last year.
Got it. Okay. Okay, so there was some discussion in the policy committee when we came to the policy on homework. There's been an update to that policy through the NHSBA that is very generic, and that as it was recommended to us. And so it got us thinking about how we sort of need to come to a philosophical stance on homework before we feel comfortable writing a policy about it or a new policy. So that led to a conversation about how best to do that. Initially, we had thought we would just send out some surveys and sort of try to get some input from administrators, but it felt better to have a larger conversation about it. So the solution we came to in that policy committee meeting was to create a subcommittee that would do some more research into homework and kind of try to bring all of that information together, and then have the policy committee develop a policy from there, which we would then recommend to the board. So in today's policy committee meeting, we had a little more discussion about this, and it felt like it might be more appropriate, rather than making a subcommittee, it might be more appropriate to call it a working group and have it be just sort of work that the committee did. I'm sorry, there's two options there. This is where this is what we discussed to get to where we got. So instead of having a formal subcommittee, we thought it could be more in the format of a working group. And then, after that discussion, we came to the solution that it might work out to have the three members of the board who are on the policy committee simply do the work and not necessarily need to name it anything. We would just do that work to gather all the information and then bring it back to the policy committee. And the reason we didn't think that was a good idea initially was that we thought it would maybe take up too much of the policy committee's time, and we had a large agenda to get through. But though the three of us on the committee spoke about it today, felt like we could handle that sort of outside of the policy committee and then bring the information back so that we could have the conversations there in that committee and not need to establish a whole new committee. So if you followed all that.
We might table this at this time
What
and
we would
revisit it.
suggest is either tabling it or voting it. I mean, I think we could also vote it down if we felt
We
comfortable.
don't need to make a motion at all, right?
No.
We don't need to make,
motion.
no, that's true. We don't need to do anything with it. I don't know if we need to since it's on the, usually if you table it, it needs to be tabled to another point. So we'd have to,
Well, we'd have to make a motion to table it, I think.
right, but what I mean is tabling to go to another date. It doesn't just get wiped off.
Right.
So I don't know if that's necessary or if we should just decide to vote against it.
We just
Or
don't
if
have a
anyone-
motion, there's no motion on the table at all, and it just,
There's no motion on the
Okay,
table.
it just
Yeah,
goes away.
if there's no motion on the table, it's
And
gone.
Nancy does have a comment.
I have a comment. Steve Adler, several months ago, you sent an email to us about your interest, not that you're interested in homework, but you had a lot of research on homework. So I forwarded that to everybody. So I was glad that you are now on the policy committee. We're now there looking at the homework. So I think that's a good idea to have, let your committee do it, and Steve particularly has an interest in it, so that would be a good group.
Yeah, the article I shared was from Edutopia, and it was just a synopsis of some research that had been done on homework.
Okay, well, if we have no motion, we can move forward. So I just want to put a bow on the committee oh, I'm sorry, do you have one more?
Oh, when you finish this, then I have a
Okay, I just wanted to put a bow on the committee discussion and say our hope is that everyone who is assigned to a committee over the next month, those committees should be, you've reached out to the people who are convening it to figure out when they meet. If there's any issue with scheduling conflicts, let me and Brian know. We can always try to swap people around to handle that. We're hoping if you're not able to attend that you will also let us know so we can try, especially with the city committees, to send a sub in so we still have those connections to work being done around the city. And if you're on school board committees and you're not able to attend regularly, we would be looking to replace you with somebody else who can attend regularly so that we have quorum and that work moves forward. And our hope for the committees that are chaired by school board members is the role of the chair would be to coordinate with the staff in the district who's the convener to add items to the agenda that are of importance to the board. And that the chair would also be able to invite guests as needed in collaboration with the convener to have conversations happen in committee. And the hope is that we'll be able to address a lot of these sort of systemic questions that we have that come up around facilities planning, around how we do our budget process, around some of the big picture policy issues like open enrollment in the committees, so that the board can stay on top of things and that we can try over time to have things bubble up to the board in a way that makes sense to everyone and everyone feels like they're well informed. So once you find out when committees meet, if you can't make it or there's some other conflict, let us know and we'll fix it. And if you're chairing a committee, we're looking to you to reach out to the convener, set a schedule, make sure that people can get there then, and report back by first board meeting in March on what your schedule is going to be at least through the end of the school year. Does that make sense to everybody? Awesome. All right, and so now we're moving on to committee updates, because we can't be done with committees yet. Nancy?
I just had a suggestion. I think many of us have heard that the city council is putting together a working group to study after-school care, and I'm wondering if a school board member, I don't know if they're going to involve people outside of the city council, but if they are, if perhaps a school board member could be on that working group. Obviously, we have a large concern about after-school care. So I don't know if you want to.
No, I think that's a fair question, and I think it was Councillor Hopkins who proposed that. I can certainly follow up and see what the status of that is. That's a good idea. Any other committee updates? I will give one quick update, hearing no others. I went to the city's legislative committee this week and did have an opportunity to speak to them about open enrollment a bit. I shared with them a copy of the letter that we all signed off on with other school boards around the state in opposition, and the city is also formally now opposed to open enrollment and will advocate in that direction along with us. So I just wanted to give that update. We're really happy to have the collaboration and the extra firepower on this.
Yep.
And if there are no other committee updates, oh, sorry, go ahead.
We did get information from Zach relative to enrollment recently, so that was really helpful. This is sort of facilities related, so I think it makes sense here. Starting to break that down and slice it in different ways. But I just wanted to appreciate the information, and it's been really helpful to look at it through that lens, and hopefully in facilities we can get into some more. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other committee updates? Future agenda requests, I would say, given the time in our non-public at the beginning, I'd say please email us, and we will definitely continue to work to get those things on the agenda when we can. And congratulations, there's no meeting next Tuesday.
Oh, Lisa, can you give us an update on the student government meeting that I missed on Saturday that I was supposed to go to?
Well, my role in that was very succinct, but Councillor Blaylock, city manager, and myself were there to give a brief overview of the day. Nathan also was there in his capacity. As far as the school board role, what we're looking at is having a policy conversation on March 19th in the morning. I believe it will be roughly from 9 to noon, but we're waiting to pin down with the student government advisors and the city what the exact timing of that is. And we have thought that there are certain policies as a policy committee that we'd like to have student feedback on, like homework, like dress code, like cell phones. I think that the students in particular were interested in having a conversation about crowdfunding and fundraising. So basically, we told the students at the meeting that they can reach out to their representative over here on the end if they have any other policies they'd like to discuss. And then it'll kind of just be a conversation. So it's not a formal policy meeting. We're not voting on anything, but any board members who have time to drop in for part of that. Once I know the exact hours, I'll let everybody know. And if you can come for an hour, great. If you want to sit there the whole time, great. Last year, I would say there were some students who were following other folks who were city staff, and they had downtime in their days, and they just kind of popped in to sit with us for a bit and chat. So we'd kind of look at it, I guess, like office hours. Like it's a chance for the students to come and talk to us about whatever policies that they want to talk about. We can certainly ask them questions about anything we'd like their input on. And it's just meant to be an informal conversation, and also just to give them a bit more of a voice, because they can't really practically come to our policy committee meetings in the middle of the school day very easily. So I don't know if there's anything you'd like to add from the student perspective on that.
I mean, yeah, I'd just say a lot of students go into student government day with the thought of I want to shadow the mayor, I want to shadow the city councilor, until they actually get up on the dais and make a comment, and I go, school board policy. So I think it's great that we have this focus this year on really getting together for a conversation. So I commend you all for that. Thank you.
And just a reminder, so on the meeting on the 10th, you'll have student shadows who will be with you, sitting up with us as we go through things. So just anticipate for a good chunk of the meeting on the 10th, we'll have students sitting with you as part of our meeting. So.
Okay. Any other future agenda questions? I will reopen public comment for the people in the room. Seeing nobody step forward, I believe that is the end of public comment, and I would take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. Is Lee still on?
Yep.
All right, roll call.
Jennifer Shump,
Yes.
Pip Clues,
Yes.
Stephen Adler,
Yes.
Byron Matto,
Yes.
Brian French,
Yes.
Lisa Rappaport, Nancy Claiberg,
No. Yes.
Lee Hudson.
Okay, if we have to.
Okay, if we have.
All set, adjourned, 9:30.